Hi IGA. In this video I'm going to explain and share some information about the score sheets that we use here in CAS to use when you're mentoring student athletes and keeping track of their grades. So one of the first things I do want to talk about before I show you the actual score sheet templates in this video is how to choose between the three different types of score sheets according to the syllabus for the student's class. So the three different types of score sheets that we use for tracking grades, you can see here at the bottom of this Google Doc. They're called raw points, individual weighted grades, and weighted categories. And so that just corresponds to how the professor grades the assignments for the class. So as you can see here on this spreadsheet that I have three different examples of what a professor will include in their syllabus for how they will be grading assignments. And I'll kind of go through what those look like and what are some hints to let you know what kind of score sheet is the best to use when you're building it for that specific class. So if we look at example 1 here, the professor has included that, there will be 10 quizzes, 3 tests, 2 papers, and a final exam, and then gives the point values for each of those type of assignments, and then also lists out the total point value for those type of assignments, and then the total points overall that the student is able to earn throughout the class. So when a teacher or a professor kind of breaks down their grading for the class in this kind of way in their syllabus, it's basically a dead giveaway that it's going to be raw points. They've already determined that they're just going to be grading on points rather than percentages. And so you can pretty much guarantee that you can use a raw points template for when you're building that class score sheet. Moving on to example 2, this professor has just listed a couple of different categories of assignments that will be occurring throughout the class, so quizzes, tests, papers, and then the final exam, and then just gives a percentage for each of those categories. We don't know how many quizzes they'll have yet, we don't know how many tests or papers they'll have yet, but we do know that however many there are, it will just account for this percentage of the total grade. And so again, this gives you a good idea that this would be a good choice for weighted categories, just because you do specifically have the category, it is given a percentage, but you don't necessarily have the number of assignments that will be in there, and that's something that you'll be able to add to your score sheet throughout the course and throughout this semester. Some professors will be nice enough to give you a breakdown of how many quizzes they'll have in the class, and they might even further break down the percentages. So let's say you'd have 10 quizzes throughout this class, and then they'll go on to say, with each quiz being worth 1% of the grade. But again, I think professors that take the time to do that are being generous, and so you won't always have that, but you will be able to build a score sheet just based off of these categories right here if you do use weighted categories. So finally, example 3. So as you can see in this example, the professor gives a list of assignments that will occur throughout the class, and then gives a specific percentage for each assignment, rather than basing it on a specific category. So as you can see here, there will be 3 tests in this class, and they say specifically that each test will be worth 10%, and then these other grades will be worth 15% each. And so to me, this tells me that this would be an individual weighted grades rather than a weighted categories, because you could have chosen weighted categories had they listed tests will be 30%. but because the professor like specifically mentioned that each test will be 10% on its own, I would rather reach for the individual weighted grades template, just so I know that I'm getting it as close to how they determine their grading to be within their syllabus. And sometimes you might get a syllabus that has each test going throughout the semester being worth more of a percentage of the grade. So maybe something like this, with the first test being worth 10%, but then the second being 15 and test 3 being worth 20%. That would be a situation where you wouldn't be able to necessarily use weighted categories as easily, because not all of the same kind of assignment are worth the same percentage, if that makes sense. So this would be a case where I would just automatically reach for the individual weighted grades template. Okay, so next up I'm going to show you how to actually start copying and pasting over this different score sheet templates into a score sheet, an overall score sheet for a student that you'd be working with. So in this case, we've got our student with the initials AA here and their blank score sheet, and we're going to build out 3 classes for them based on the examples that I talked about earlier. So first we're going to go with our raw points example, and again you can see that at the very last tabs on each sports score sheet that you're working with are going to be the template tabs for each of the different kinds of score sheets. So we'll go to the raw points tab, and as you can see here, I'll zoom out a little bit. There are 2 different templates to choose from, and that's because professors here at Memphis, they can decide whether or not they're going to use a plus-minus system or not to grade their course. So that will be something that you definitely need to look for when you're looking through your syllabi for your students' classes. So for the sake of this example, we'll just say that the professor does use a plus-minus, and so you'll literally just copy and paste this whole template, starting with the class over to the cell that says professor, and then bring it all the way down to this bar right here that says current estimated grade. So you want to select that whole section, and then you can copy it. So you can either right click and copy, or you can use your keyboard shortcuts, so Control-C on a Windows computer or Command-C if you're using a Mac. And then come back to your Students tab, and you can just paste it. So again, you can right click and paste, or if you're using keyboard shortcuts, it would be Control-V on a Windows computer or Command-V on a Mac. So I've pasted the template here, and so you can definitely go ahead and add in what the class is, what time the class meets, and then the professor's name. I also like to include the professor's email address in this section, just because the student will most likely need to have that at some point during the semester. As you can see in all of the templates for the score sheet, there are some note sections here at the top, and I'm sure y'all will talk a little bit more about this, but some good examples of some notes that you might want to include at the top would be what the late attendance or the attendance policy is for the class, if there's a late work policy for the class, if the professor just flat out doesn't accept late work, if the student's going to need some access codes to access some assignments and things like that. Just any information that stands out to you as you're reading through the syllabus, you're going to want to put that up here at the top so that you can see that as you're working with the student and checking through the score sheets every day. as well as the counselors whenever they're going in and looking at the score sheets. So again, based on the example that I showed you earlier, I'm going to fill in the different assignment names here in this first column. Now that you've gotten each assignment that you know that's going to happen in this class filled out in your assignment column, ideally there will be some dates in the syllabus or somewhere located on eCourseware that you'll be able to go ahead and fill in. You will have classes where the professors haven't uploaded any dates, or they're not listed in the syllabus but they're listed in a different document, or the student needs to write them down as they go over them in class. But hopefully, for your sake, you will have a list as you're going through and building your score sheets within the first couple of weeks, so that you'll already have that information. So if you do have that information, go ahead and fill out what dates you do have here in the date column. So next up for raw points score sheet, you're going to go to your worth column here and fill in how many points each of these assignments is worth. So again, looking back at our example, I'm going to fill in the different point amounts that each assignment is worth. Okay, so now that you have that, one thing I do want to note about the raw points template specifically, and in general, a good note to know about all of the templates that we have for our score sheets. Any columns or specific cells that are in red typically mean that there's a formula hidden in those cells, and so you never want to come into these cells and enter your own information, because it would then erase the formula that's there, which helps to calculate the grade down here at the bottom. For example, if I were to enter some numbers here, that would throw off and delete a formula, and then that would cause your score sheet to be inaccurate. And so again, any columns in red, or later on you'll see in our in the weighted categories template, you'll have some cells that have zeros or certain numbers in them that are already marked red. You never want to change those manually, because again, it could affect the formulas and then affect how the score sheet actually works for you. So basically, once you input your assignments, what those assignments are worth, any due dates that you have, and any other notes that you may need to put that are specific to each assignment, that's basically it for raw points. These are definitely my personal favorite, because they're pretty straightforward to fill out and to use. Okay, so continuing on through our different template examples for score sheets, I'm going to show you how to copy over and fill out a weighted categories score sheet. So again, just looking down at the bottom through these tabs for our template, we're going to go to weighted categories. And again, we'll just choose the plus minus template and select it. Scroll all the way down and copy it. And when you're building from a completely blank score sheet, you can just paste it right next to the other class that you already have on there. And again, you're going to fill in what the class is, when it meets, what time, and then the professor's name and email. And then, of course, any pertinent notes here up at the top. So as you can probably already see, this template looks a little bit different, a little more involved. than our raw points one did. But I will go ahead and show you how you want to fill out your information for this class. So again, if you'll remember, I said any cells that are already marked red, or like these columns right here, where their titles are in red, you never want to manually input any information there. Anything that you will be typing in will be elsewhere through your score sheet, and I'll show you that. But yeah, you just want to make sure that you're not putting in any information in these cells right here. So what we'll do first is fill out what our different categories are from our example. Our categories listed already. If the teacher or professor does include specifics to how many of a certain category that you have, or let's say, for instance, there's 3 different quizzes, and the first one's going to be specifically over Chapter 6, the second one will be over Chapter 10, and the last one will be over Chapter 15. So that would be something that you could go ahead and type in here, just so you are able to differentiate as you're getting grades throughout the semester. And it'll also help you keep better track of your due dates and grades and different things like that. So you can go ahead and list them out like that if your professor has included that specific information in their syllabus. I do think it is probably more likely to happen with papers, so they might be specific as to they'll have a research paper, and then they might have a group paper and different things like that. That's something you probably likely see specifically listed in a category such as that. And then sometimes, and a lot of times, tests will literally just be test 1, test 2, test 3. If you find that you need to include more cells or more assignments within a category, so let's say we only have space for 4 quizzes here, but you know that there's going to be 5, you can just insert a blank row. So if you already know that there's going to be 5 quizzes and you don't have space for that, I would make sure that you leave this last row blank so that you can right click there, go to insert cells, and then click shift down, and it'll automatically shift everything down. And if you do it this way, your formulas should stay accurate. You shouldn't have to worry about anything shifting around as long as you're inserting from a blank cell, or from things that don't already have values typed into the assignments or dates or made column, things like that. So you should be able to do that as many times as you need to get as many lines under a specific category as you need for the different assignments that are listed in your syllabus. Similarly, with this class example, we only have 4 categories that are listed for grades, but as you can see in the template, we have space for an additional 4 categories that we're not going to actually use that will affect the student's grade. So you can actually take those cells out as well. So you can click this, scroll over, and then scroll all the way down right before you get to your estimated grade bar down at the bottom. So select that whole area, and then you can right click, hover over delete cells, and then click shift up. And so it'll look like this. And you'll probably notice that now, instead of having the original message that you have in your template, which is this little error code and no grade for when you have no grades in, it changes to this. And this is just an error, again, showing you that the reference does not exist. And what that means is, because we took out those categories, part of the formula that existed in this reference back to those categories that we deleted. So all we need to do is change that formula. So you can see in your weight and percent column, which in all other situations, you're not going to change anything in. If you are deleting categories, you can see that this little red flag appears in the corner of it, and that's again telling you that your formula is no longer working correctly. So you can click in those cells, and if you come up here, so this is your formula bar, you can see that the first part of the formula is referencing back to the cells that correspond to the categories that we still do have, and then it's got these blue like reference alerts, meaning that there's no cells that exist there anymore. So you just need to take those out. So you can click here and just delete those and then close out your formula. So again, the great thing about Google Docs is when you're building your formula, it color codes things for you. So again, you can see that this 08 cell is in yellow, and it's showing you this 08 cell that it's talking about that it's going to calculate for you. So again, once you've deleted out your parts of the formula that aren't working for you anymore, you can press enter, and that will work. And then you'll do the same thing in your percent column and press enter. And we're back to having this regular error code, just meaning that we don't have any grades in yet. And then again, showing no grade so far in the score sheet. So once you've added the cells that you needed, taken out the cells that you don't need, again, you can add any due dates that you have, and then in your worth column, so again, not changing these red zeros, but in your worth column, if your professor has listed any point values for specific assignments, you can go ahead and add those here, just so you know as you're going throughout the semester with your student that, you know, quizzes will be worth this many points, etc. To be able to add the percentage for each category, you're going to put it on the same row that the category name is, but in the percent column. So for quizzes, we had them at 10%. So you'll just put a 10 here. You don't need to put a percentage sign afterwards. You just need to put the number value. So, and you can press enter. And then you'll do the same thing for each of your categories. So again, another good thing to note is that you only need to put the percent for each category once, and on that same line of the category name, you don't need to list them throughout the entire category like this. That's not necessary to the formula for the score sheet. And again, reminder, don't put anything in your weight or percent columns. They already have formulas that will calculate once you actually start putting grades into your score sheet. Okay, so now we're going to move on to our last type of score sheet, which is individual weighted grades. So again, coming down to the bottom of the Google Doc, come to individual weighted grades, select your corresponding template, and then copying and pasting right next to your other one. And then again, you'll fill in the class, time that it meets, and the professor. And of course, any notes that are important to know up at the top. When you're entering assignments on your individual weighted grades score sheet, it's a little bit more similar to your raw points. So I will go ahead and enter our different assignments from our example. course, you'll enter any due dates that you already know of, any notes that are specific to those assignments, and then in the worth column, you will put what point value each of those assignments is worth. Again, hopefully this is something that is already listed in your syllabus or somewhere on eCourseware. So again, putting in point values here in a worth column. And hopefully it'll be just that simple. And then you'll put your percentage that each individual assignment is worth in this percent column. So going back to our example, we've got our tests at 10% each. And again, you can just put the number here. Don't put it with a percentage sign. That's already factored into the formula for the score sheet. And then our different papers and assignments. And then finally, the final exam being worth 25%. And again, your weight and percent column, you won't manually put any information there. Formulas exist there and will automatically populate data into there once you start putting grades in as you receive them from your students. And so again, that's basically it for individual weighted grades, and yeah, is a little bit simpler, I would think, than your weighted categories. All right, so now that you have all of your templates put onto your student score sheet with as much information that you have at the ready, you're ready to use them as you go throughout the semester. And so now I'm going to show you our highlighting system when it comes to making sure that a student has turned in assignments, completed assignments, and then how to input grades once you've seen them. So I'll mainly work off of the raw points template here, and I'll zoom you back in. So again, as you're working with the student and you're mentoring with them throughout the week, you want to be keeping your score sheet as up to date as possible. And so you'll be meeting with your students each day, getting any grade updates, getting any progress updates on what assignments have been completed and turned in and things like that. So when talking with the student, when working with them and mentoring with them, once you know that a student has completed something, it's turned in, it's submitted in a Dropbox, or turned in class, or however that assignment needs to be completed, once you know for sure that it's been completed and turned in, you will highlight the entire row for that assignment and turn it yellow. That basically just means that it's pending. You're waiting to receive a grade back for that assignment, but you know that it's been completed and turned in. So ideally, next, the student will be receiving a grade for that assignment. And that is where you'll utilize this made column. So you'll just input here whatever grade that the student made on the assignment. So we'll say a 20 out of 25 for this quiz. So you will continue to leave this assignment yellow until you have seen this grade with your own eyes and verified it to be true. If a student is running to the elevator as they're leaving study hall and says, oh, this is what I got on my quiz, but you haven't seen it on eCourseware on their portal, you still want to leave it yellow, and you can add a note saying like per student still need to verify. That just reminds you to go back and verify a grade. It alerts the counselor as they're going through score sheets that, this is probably what they made, but we, again, still need to verify it. But you can have that score in there, and I'll show you down here at the bottom it will impact the current estimated grade for the class. So you can still kind of get, again, a running estimate of how that grade impacts the student, but you still have this indicator here that you need to go back and double check and verify that that is the grade that they earned for the assignment. Once you have seen the grade with your own eyes and verified it, well, you can take out this note, and then what you want to do is, again, select this whole row for the assignment, and you're going to turn it a light blue. So this, again, alerts the counselor that this is a new grade that they haven't seen or that you two haven't talked about in your one-on-one meetings before. So, you know, let's say a student gets like 3 new grades for the week, and you haven't met with your counselor for your weekly meeting yet. You'll keep all of those blue so that when you do meet with the counselor, they can automatically see that this is something new that they probably need to include on their grade reports to coaches and things like that. That's something that you haven't discussed yet. That's just an easy way for them to tell what's occurred since you two last met. So after your weekly meetings, you'll come back into your score sheet, and everything that's blue, you'll go ahead and highlight green. And green means that the grade is in, it's been verified, you've talked over it with the counselor, they know about it, everybody's on the same page, and the assignment is finished. So green is great. We want all score sheets to be as green as possible. That just means that everything's been completed, turned in, verified, and we're good to go with those. Unfortunately, we do have to have a way to indicate assignments that have either been completely missed or maybe turned in late. And so if that does happen, you'll just select the row for the assignment and turn it red. And if at all possible, you'll want to include a note about why that is. So yeah, whether or not they just missed it or if they turned it in late. And in this case, if you have any further information, like turned in late by 2 days, and whether or not they'll receive a penalty for that, or whether or not you know if the professor's accepting it, just anything that you're able to tell the counselor so that they can know what has happened with that assignment specifically and what measures the student and you have taken when it comes to that assignment in particular. And so, again, if it's something that's been completely missed or turned in late, and, you know, depending on the professor's late work policy and things like that, ultimately that might result in you entering a 0 in the made column. So, but that is what we do for any missed work or late assignments. You'll turn those red. A couple last minute things that I want to be able to share with you guys as far as how the score sheets work. So again, looking back at this example that we were working on with the raw point score sheet, you can see that as we are entering grades that the student has earned in our made column, it has caused our formulas to go into action, and you can see that in this worth calc column that's red that you don't actually put anything in, the formula is inputting information based on you entering grades into the score sheet. So again, I can show you here for this Misc grade, if you put in a 0, this automatically populated with a 25. And so it will continue to do that as you enter scores here based on the formulas that are within the score sheet to ultimately give you a current estimated grade down at the bottom. And I want to show you what that looks like in the weighted categories score sheet, because it does look a little bit different, a lot more changes when you start entering grades. So for example, I'll put a 25 out of 25 for this Chapter 6 quiz. And when I do that, you can see that a lot changed here. So again, in these cells that are red, what they're doing is taking the total points for each of these assignments in your category and summing them. So as you can see, we put our 25 here, so it's added that sum here. It's also added it here, but only for the assignments that have currently received grades. And then, of course, it's put in some more information here to be able to calculate your grade here down at the bottom. So I can show you again. Let's say you don't do as well on the next. So again, you have your total points that have been earned from the student, the total that they had the possibility to earn here with the 50, so they've only taken 2 quizzes. So far they've only been able to earn 50 points, and again, you've got more information that is populating here to ultimately affect your grade here. So that's another thing I wanted to mention with weighted categories. You'll know that your score sheet may not be calculating accurately if these sums aren't adding up. So, you know, if for some reason they've made 25s on each of these quizzes, but this is coming out to, you know, like a 200 or something like that, that's obviously going to change the way that your grade is being estimated. So every so often, every couple weeks when you get some time, you'll just want to go through your score sheets and make sure that everything is kind of adding up correctly. And again, something like this would be a dead giveaway that it's not working. But sometimes it can be, you know, hard to catch, and if you're not, you know, specifically looking for it, but it can ultimately affect what we're reporting grades as for students, and that obviously does matter and is a very big attention to detail kind of thing in this position, so that's something that you'll want to look out for. But again, I think that's kind of the basics on how to build a score sheet, how to fill one out, and then again, how to highlight one and indicate whether or not something's been completed and things like that as you're working with your students. So I hope that information was helpful. If you ever do need any help or any additional tips and tricks when it comes to filling out score sheets or troubleshooting them, obviously utilize your learning specialists. Definitely utilize the counselors. They are pros at this, and I wish you the best of luck.